So today we did a STEM activity for sinking or swimming.
Sinking or floating.
I'm sorry, sinking or floating. Design a boat challenge. And some of the activity I thought was really above our kids' heads. I know that for pre-activity, there was a video, 2 books were read, and a thorough explanation of the terms for buoyancy and sinking and floating with a direct instructional video.
Mm-hmm. And this was even the kindergarten and first grade lesson. This was the modified lesson.
Right, so you pre-measured the aluminum foil that was to be used. You had a distinct number of pennies that you counted out. You had a tub half full of water for the children to use, and all the instructions were explained and the materials were given to the children in advance. You modeled what was to be done with the foil, but each child was able to pre-draw what he or she wanted their boat to look like in advance. You explained and had discussion about what a boat is and why a boat would sink or why a boat might float. And the kids gave them pretty good explanations in the beginning. But and you did an excellent job jotting down what their thoughts and who agreed with who and who didn't agree with who, and you did a real good job of ignoring the nonsense of shoe tying and floor rolling and flipping. But and you had your teacher's choice too, because you created you didn't create things for the children, but they created themselves, so it was self-motivated. Oh, no, I wrote here. Oh, the instructions say that the children should be divided into teams, but based on the dynamics of your classroom,
Yes.
it was best that I noticed that you felt it best that the children not be paired.
Mm-hmm. They did individual.
Yeah, that's not the best situation in the classroom. So that they build a little independent skills for themselves, and they don't always pair well. They didn't always pair well. And even when you had some meltdowns with the boats that didn't float, some of the boats that sank, you handled that very well. you let the melty children melt, and you continued with the lesson, or the directions in your classroom continued. I noticed there was a post-activity after, and I think the post-activity reinforced very well what went on, because in the post-activity I noticed they filled garbage cans of sand to make the boat sink, which is exactly what happened. You're putting pennies in the boat to make the boat sink. That's the intention, but some of the boats still floated. So in your activity, I noticed that you counted the pennies, so that reinforced the skill of counting. And the actual science of the activity, which STEM is supposed to be science, technology, engineering, and math. So you had the science, you had the low tech, but still tech, engineering because they had to build, and you had math, so you had all the points in that activity. I don't know if the students understand that point. I did think the challenge was a little too high.
It was.
If it had come later in the year, it might have.
I'm not sure.
No.
I think it's still a little bit much for them to grasp, to build things, because it's outside of the box for them. It wasn't pre-made like a puzzle where you just put it together. It was, I've got to think about it myself. And I don't think that kindergartners are ready for that.
And kindergartners at our school don't get STEM on a regular basis, so it's not something that they were introduced to at a lower level and it built. It's like every 2-3 weeks we get an activity, and they're supposed to be able to comprehend and know, understand, and do, and learn something from it. I don't really see that they learned anything valuable from this lesson, other than we know something might sink. Some kids did, because some kids knew a boat would float, and if you put a hole in it, it would not. Some kids understand boats carry things, but as a whole, I don't think it was a constructive of a lesson. The map lesson, last social studies lesson that they did, I think that was really good. It wasn't a STEM activity, but it was a valuable lesson. It was easy to differentiate, and it was valuable. Some kids could draw how to get from the door to their seat. Some kids could draw how to get down the hall, and some kids could draw how to get from the classroom to the playground. So you could easily differentiate that. This one was more difficult to differentiate.
Yes.
And it was less easy to understand, and it was apparently less pleasant for some.
Yes.
Because they didn't quite gain anything from it. We have a making connection sessions here, and I'm not really sure that there was a connection made for buoyancy. That's a pretty big word for kindergartners. So I'm not sure they understood the buoyancy force. The extension, I don't really think we needed to bother with because it was too much for them. And I can't think of any way we could have made it less challenging and more understandable. Other than having a pre-made boat or just doing a sink or swim for our kids. Will these items sink and will these items float? What'll float and what'll sink and not doing the boat at all.
Right.
That might have been more productive. That's something we might be able to revisit when it's warmer and we can do it outside. Because your floor was soaking wet.
Yes.
And more kids were interested in squeaking the floor or walking around in their socks. But the counting was a valuable part. Other than that, unless we used styrofoam cups and counted pennies to see if we could make it sink.
How many it would take to make that sink.
Yeah, that might have been more
But
valuable.
then there's no engineering to it, so it wouldn't have fit in the STEM lesson.
Because we don't build styrofoam cups. You are not in my frame.
Oh, sorry.
So other than that, I'm not sure how we could have. Now the only measurable part that I feel was productive was the counting of the pennies,
Yes.
reinforcing that skill. How many this one carried and how many that one carried, not who's floated or who's sank. Just the counting portion.
Well, we were able to tie the post video talked about the submarine sinking, so we were able to tie that into the maps that we've been talking about, how they were in the water.
Okay.
So we're able to make a connection to something we've been talking about, not necessarily what this lesson was about, but they told me that they were in the ocean and that the ocean, there's, then we made that connection that the ocean was on a globe. And then we talked about how it was on the earth. It wasn't just necessarily on the globe. So we were able to make some connections to other things we've been talking about.
Okay. Well, this would definitely need to be something that our STEM coordinator needs to get feedback from the kindergarten grade level to know that this might not be the most appropriate activity for kindergarten. It might need to be a first grade activity only. Kindergarten might need to do just the float sink, just the a plethora of items to see which ones float and which ones sink, not building the boat to see whose boat floats or sinks. Some kids struggle to build a boat. Some students have a ball of aluminum foil. Some people had the aluminum foil just the way you gave it to them. Because even so, they're supposed to see if it floats and then go back and reconstruct. And once you make it into a ball, you can't reconstruct aluminum foil.
Right.
So that didn't work. But just to redesign it so that we float or sink. You agree?
Yes.
All right. I think that's something we need to present to her for the next time. Please tell me I started it.
You did. It's counting.
I forget sometimes.
Are you done?